Bhatti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. It's a great honour to follow my honourable friend from Christchurch, who I have to say was one of his shorter speeches that I'm. Look, we come here for a very serious matter of some of one of the most utmost gravity. I've heard a number of really good speeches from all sides of the House, including members of the opposite benches, and I do commend all the members who've stood up and said, because it's not an easy thing to do, all of the members who have stood up and said that they're not happy with the government's position. I am very, very pleased that we've got to a point where there is a manuscripted amendment now that will force the hand of the government and make sure that the ISC has a pivotal and critical role to play. But I do want to pick up on a number of members who made some points that I do agree with and some that I don't. And while I agreed with a lot of the points that were said today, I did notice that a couple of members did say the government got here because they demonstrated leadership. They did not demonstrate leadership. No. They got here because they were dragged here to do so. They got here because there was a dump of documents by the DOJ, and the leader of the opposition tabled a motion which forced their hand, which meant that members opposite had to finally confront the fact that the Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, had a relationship with Epstein for much longer than many of us knew, but certainly the Prime Minister knew. As we found out earlier today. But this idea that the government has demonstrated leadership is for the birds. And it's important, by the way. It's important because I've heard members across the House talk about the victims of Epstein. But I say to members opposite, they are just words if you do not follow them up with action. And while the ISC amendment is important today, that is not the end of the journey. Because for months now, we have been pushing on this side of the House to get clarity and find out the truth as to what has been going on with the appointment of Lord Mandelson. This goes right to the heart of our politics. And what did we find out today when the Leader of the Opposition challenged the Prime Minister? He'd run out of road, and he finally had to come clean that he knew about his relationship. And this idea that you need to know the depths of the relationship. I asked members opposite, what is the depth of a relationship with a paedophile that you need to have before it becomes eligible for declaration?
I think the fact that the Prime Minister resisted giving that answer for so long proves the fact he knows it's incredibly damaging to his judgment, that he didn't want people to know that he had known and appointed him anyway.
Well, I think it's. I agree with my honourable friend, and we were sat together in the debate reflecting on some of the speeches, and when we talk about, I think it was the Health Secretary who talked about the toxic culture at number 10. Well, this debate, that amendment was a demonstration of that toxic culture, because it wasn't for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein that amendment was put forward. It was to protect the Prime Minister. Now, of course, I get. Absolutely.
And does my honourable friend agree with me that actually to try and focus on the angle of what he did as a minister in releasing secrets and trying to make money from them, etc., is still deflecting from the fact that a man who was associating with a convicted and now released paedophile was felt to be worth the risk to have been sent to America as the ambassador?
Exactly. We should all share anger in that, because it speaks to a rot that has now, as we find out, has infected our politics and government in this country, Labour governments in this country for decades. And look, I get it. People make mistakes, but this is what. I get it. People make mistakes on all sides of the House, but this is of such gravity that it speaks to a corruption that we actually need to get to the answer. But the point my honourable friend just made, my right honourable friend just made, the point he just made is really, really important, because that is one issue about corruption, but you cannot get away from the fact that Mandelson had a role at every echelon of the Labour Party's journey, whether it was New Labour before we came into power in 2010, or the new Labour that is now in charge. Whether it was helping in the selection of candidates, or it was whether it is the honourable members shake their head, and I'm more than happy. I'll take the intervention on behalf of everybody.
I thank the honourable member for taking the intervention, and I intervened to make a point, because I wouldn't want any member of this House to inadvertently besmirch any other member through misleading information. I served on the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party for 10 years before I entered this place. Peter Mandelson had no role whatsoever in the selection of Labour Party candidates during that time. So I would just make that point so that individuals are aware exactly of what they're talking about.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to say I didn't mention any single member of the House, so I'm happy that she's put that on record. But I do not trust Mandelson. And I do not trust. Let me. I'm answering the intervention. I do not trust Mandelson for what he has done, and how far his reach was in this government or in this party. I do not trust him because we know he had a very close relationship. She can shake her head all she wants. We know she had a close relationship with Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. The party opposite hasn't even started to address the point of the Chief of Staff. And I do not believe for a second, and I hope she's right, by the way, but just in case she's not, and the documents do come to the fore, I'm sure we'll come back to this House to scrutinise which members he had a hand in appointing.
Thank you. Just on that point, it's currently in the mainstream media at the moment that Mandelson had a handle on recruiting candidates for the Labour Party. The mainstream media are reporting this. They will have evidence to support this and back this up. There will be candidates that have been selected where he's had his hand on, and he's also been in cabinet reshuffles. That's what is rumoured to believe. So he has had a far bigger reach than probably most of you realise, and any defence of that now is indefensible.
I couldn't have said that better myself, although I may not have used the word you, but that's This is important. This is important because of the reach that Mandelson had and how he was enabled. And at every step of the way, there was no regard for Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And that is a really, really important point, because there's been a lot of obfuscation today. We've had to drag the government into this position where this amendment has now been put forward, where they now will release documents to the IC. And I noticed the earlier intervention about the role of the IC that my honourable friend made. I think it was a really important point. Because if members opposite, I say this again, this is not the end of the journey. They have a role to play now. They have a role. I will admit they have a role to play now in terms of doing right by those victims. Because what we do know is that Mandelson was an enabler, and anyone who's enabled Mandelson needs to take a long, hard look at themselves.
Giving way, but isn't the wider point here? If the Prime Minister was duped, wouldn't you be releasing the papers back in September when we had the SO24 debate, or putting them out now, rather than bringing it to a debate here where he's forced his hand to have these papers? The only reason we're having some papers released is because his hand has been forced by the Leader of the Opposition. Doesn't he think that's bizarre?
Correct.
Well, it's not bizarre because we've been here many times before. They've been dragged time after time, scandal after scandal. I say to backbenchers opposite, this is a Prime Minister who's now flailing. He's admitted, after months and months of pushing, that he knew about the relationship that Mandelson had with Epstein, and yet he thought it was a risk worth taking anyway. And I made this point earlier, that risk worth taking, it wasn't just about denigrating the experience of those victims. It's also, the risk worth taking was marching all those members up a hill and using their careers. And it's okay, look, we're members of Parliament, we care about our careers, wherever they may end up. But the truth of the matter is he did not care about that. And that journey is not over yet, because he is going to use them over and over again. He will throw people under the bus. Before he throws his Chief of Staff under the bus, that will happen too. I can almost guarantee it.
Does my honourable friend think that we're going to get to any sort of position where we can start to understand what level of influence did Mandelson have that, having not declared six-figure sum loans, had to resign from government, having tried to flog passports, had to resign from government, having gone off to the EU, and now all the allegations of that brought back into government, put in the House of Lords? There must have been something that made people think it was a good idea to bring him back again and again and again.
The exasperation that my right honourable friend shows is exactly the exasperation that the British public will be seeing as they read the headlines, and they have been seeing and showing as the stories have unfolded. As the stories have unfolded over the last few days and over the last few months. And this really comes to a really fundamental point about the toxicity at number 10. And this is really important because this is where the members, they have the authority and the power to do something about this. The toxicity at number 10 because the rot starts at the top. And this is fundamental. Because the Prime Minister, it was obvious to all of us, it was obvious to all of us about this relationship that Mandelson had. It was obvious to us when he appointed Mandelson to one of the most important positions in our country and one of the most important capitals in the world. One of the most important capitals in the world. It was obvious to us. And the Prime Minister did it anyway, because he thought it was a risk worth taking.
In response to the intervention from my right honourable friend, the member for Wetherby, there's a key difference between this Prime Minister and former Labour Prime Ministers in that Gordon Brown and Tony Blair appointed Peter Mandelson without knowing some of the connections that he had. The key difference is that this Prime Minister knew and still did it. So there is still a Labour Prime Minister with integrity, and that's Gordon Brown, who actually took this to the police. This Prime Minister did no such thing.
I thank my honourable friend, who always makes excellent points, and I was going to talk about Gordon Brown later, but I will do it now. Because he raised the question back in September. He wanted to know what has gone on, and he asked the question, and he was battered away. Has any government minister, when the minister stands up at the dispatch box, has he asked the Cabinet Secretary why the former Prime Minister was battered away? Did that former Prime Minister not have any respect in number 10 for him to get a legitimate answer as to what happened and what went down there? I think the public deserves to know. I think this House deserves to know. I think there's another point I just wanted to make around integrity, and it was made by a number of members earlier, including my right honourable friend for Skipton and Ripon. But the Prime Minister, by that admission, has called into question the integrity of every member of this House, because we all know that trust in politicians is at an all-time low. We all know that. We see it on our doorstep. We see it in our inboxes. I was at a birthday party for my 4.5-year-old son on the weekend. I was chatting to some parents, and of course, with the Mandelson headlines, this came up. And I had to say, look, it's not normal for a billionaire to fly people out, fly members. You know, we have a pretty strict expenses regime. Despite what after the expenses scandal, we have to, we can't move left or right, and yet the British public do not trust us because they think we take them for granted. And I had to explain to them that it's not normal to be invited onto islands and have all these luxuries thrown at you. This was not a normal kind of behaviour. And yet the Prime Minister knew about this relationship and he let it happen. And this is really important. Absolutely.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. What I find more extraordinary is, as he says, the Prime Minister knew, but he also stood at that dispatch box in September and said that he had full confidence in Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, knowing what he knew. Does he not find that extraordinary?
I find it disgusting. I find it disgusting. And I say to Labour members opposite, they are now at a crossroads. And it's really, really important, this. Because if they really care about those victims, and what Epstein did was absolutely disgusting in its own right. He trafficked, he was a child sex offender. In many ways, he was a coward in how he left this world, because I wish he'd face the full force of the law. But we have to be honest about the people. I think the honourable member for Bolsover talked about enablers and the powerful men and the role that they played. And Labour members now are at a crossroads, because if they really care about the victims of Epstein, they really need to ask how this was allowed to happen. And it's not, by the way, it's not just about Mandelson. And it's not just about Epstein. My good friend for Rutland and Melton, for Rutland and Stamford, sorry.
Near Melton.
Near Melton. Made the point earlier about Bill Gates. To be honest, I was watching the video of Melinda Gates just yesterday. And I was talking to my wife about how horrible it must have been to see those emails and see what he was up to. She mentioned Richard Branson. The reality is, there is clearly a culture of men who thought they were above the law. And while the DOJ is grappling with it over there, and I commend the debate here. We've talked about some very important things here today. We also have to be honest about the fact that it came onto our shores. And it's possible that there are still victims that we don't know about. It is possible that there are still criminal investigations that need to happen. And the assurance I need from the front bench today is that if that comes open, or comes to the fore, that the government will act quickly to make sure criminal investigations are started. The public require that to help us on that journey to rebuilding trust, and we shouldn't underestimate that.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and he's making a powerful, wide-ranging speech, and I'm sure more details will come out. But doesn't it already come down to this, that the Prime Minister appointed a man, Peter Mandelson, as US Ambassador, who he knew at the time he appointed him had had a long-standing friendship with a prolific international convicted paedophile, to the extent that Peter Mandelson had stayed in that paedophile's house while he was serving prison time. And that in itself is sickening and shocking. And not only should nobody be defending Peter Mandelson, which they're not, nobody should be defending the Prime Minister for his sickening conduct.
The Prime Minister has really brought his judgment into question. Now, for us, of course, we've been saying it for a couple of years. We're opposition do that. But on this issue, the way he has marched everyone up a hill, ministers have gone to defend this issue time and time again. His position really is now untenable. And I guarantee members opposite, they can go home to their constituencies and go talk to constituents right now. They will have to answer questions as to why the Prime Minister allowed this to happen.
Grateful to my honourable friend giving way, and he may have heard the powerful speech by the member for Leeds East earlier in the day about factionalism in the party. The Prime Minister not only appointed Peter Mandelson, knowing, as he declared today, what he knew, to the post of ambassador, he previously brought him in as a strategic advisor, advocate, planner in the 2024 Labour election campaign. So all members opposite are tainted by that association with Mandelson, brought about by the leader of their party, now Prime Minister, who knew about it at the time. And this perhaps hasn't been picked up on as fully as it should have been in today's debate.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to leave members to reflect on that, because I think many have spoken up today. But I say once again, they are just words if there is no action. And the judgment of the Prime Minister is deeply, deeply flawed. He allowed this, he alone is responsible for the culture at number 10. I ran a business. If there was something going wrong, buck stopped with me. He alone is responsible for the culture at number 10. It's not Morgan McSweeney. He enabled Morgan McSweeney. It should definitely needs to be held accountable for his relationship, and we need to see those emails. We need to see what the conversations were. That's why this is important. But the buck stops with the Prime Minister.
I'm going to raise a very sensitive issue here, because my honourable friend raised a point about vulnerable women being abused, about powerful men taking advantage, about a friend who was appointed, known to be a friend of a convicted paedophile. And we also have a Labour government who ran away from investigating grooming gangs. Again, vulnerable women taken advantage by powerful men, and a Labour government that said it stands up for women, stands up for women's rights and vulnerable women. It has shown now it does not at any level, at the highest level, and at those who are white working class girls. Labour, I'm afraid, has got a lot of answers about protecting women.
I'm going to end with my response, with two responses to that intervention. Number one, she's obviously absolutely right. And I say to members opposite and who are shaking their heads, it brings into question every decision that the government has made because of the lack of judgment that the Prime Minister has shown. And I say to my honourable friend, I stood at that dispatch box and I repeatedly called for a national grooming inquiry. Right? I am a British, Pakistani male. I'm Muslim. I have two sons. I want them to grow up without aspersions being cast on them.
Hear.
Where one day I hope to have a daughter. Sorry to my wife. I want her to grow up in a safe environment. Right. So we have to be honest about that. We have to be strong in those calls. But I say to the Minister now, as he answers those questions, very key. The question about the ISC, really, really important. We need to know, with the amendment there, that they will get full authority to be able to deal with what comes in front of them, and so we can make a judgment, and the public can make a judgment. Number two, Gordon Brown raised the question: why did his calls fall on deaf ears? Was he not given the respect to the former Prime Minister for that to be dealt with? Was Mandelson that strong that his toxicity meant that he was protected and he was enabled? And number three, and the point that I made repeatedly, the judgment of the Prime Minister surely has to be in question. We will now find out what else was known. The Minister has an opportunity to show anything else that he might want to share at the dispatch box.
Yeah.